Hello and welcome back to Getting Started with Zen CSS. Today we're going to be covering a classic example, Hello World. First, we'll hop into the project, we'll give an overview of the file structure, explain what files live where, why they're there. Next, move on with creating a simple Hello World page. We'll also work on best practices for web page structure. I'll explain to you how the pages are structured within Zen CSS. We're going to be doing an intro to Zentax, which is our new micro syntax that works with right along with Zen CSS. It's customized for it. We'll also be talking about building a website section with the Smart Align framework. Now, tomorrow's video, we're going to cover the Smart Align framework in great detail, so I'm not going to go a whole bunch into it today, but we'll get your feet wet with it. We'll get your feet wet with it, rather. And then finally, we'll work on some examples and reviewing the Zen CSS documentation. I'll show you how to take an actual site section and implement it in your page. So let's get started. All right, so picking up where we left off yesterday, we have VS Code open and we have the Zen CSS project loaded within VS Code. And I'd like to go through these files in a little bit further detail for you. Now, the first thing that's important is the index.html file. You will notice that it is a local copy of the website, which is important because you have your documentation, you have your site sections, your components, all the demos, all the utility documentation, and so it's a great place to have a local reference to all of the files, especially because, again, we do provide examples, but some of them are streamlined, and so we do provide these fully built out sections that you can go to, inspect, copy, paste, and get a better idea of how these sections were built out. And that relates to the docs here. The docs contains all of that relevant information. So a lot of it's in examples, some of it's in help desk, but the way you go ahead and access it is through that index.html file. Now next, let's take a quick overview of the SCSS directory. You'll notice that it's broken up into 4 distinct folders: core, design, general, optional. There's a user settings file and a Zen CSS file. Now, the Zen CSS is what's used to actually build the entire project out. The user settings are customizable settings that you can use. We recommend using an override file rather. There's some documentation on the website, and we will cover that in a later video. But just to be aware that this is the file, everything is structured in these folders, and you use this SCSS and you use the build command that we covered in the previous video in order to generate the compiled CSS files, which are stored in the dist folder. So moving on to the dist folder, we have the Hello World example we'll be covering today. We also have the CSS files, which consist of the icons, minified icons, the Zen CSS, the map file, and the minified file. And then on the JavaScript side, in the JavaScript directory, we have all of our modules that are available for Zen CSS. Everything's broken out and compartmentalized. And then we have our Webpack config file, which actually builds all of those and generates the CSS and minified and map files on the CSS side. And finally, we have the images directory, which just contains some basic images that are used within the framework. So those are the key files within the Zen CSS system. And so let's talk about the Hello World page. Now, when you go ahead and open up the index.html file in your browser, you will notice this is what is in the Hello World page. We have actually already built out a simple page structure for you just so you have something to work with. So when working with Zen CSS, I want you to think about web pages like slices of a cake, layers of a cake, for example, right? So you have the header layer, you have the A spot or the hero spot, and you have another section. We could call this the B spot, this could be the C spot, the D spot, and all the way down, and there's a footer. And so when you think about developing things that way, right, like you create a container, you create a row, you put information in that row, right? Maybe multiple cells, but it's a basic container framework. Now, a basic container framework, most people may do like a div, and then do container, and then you could do another div and put a row inside it, and then you could do another div and put your column, and then you would put your content here. And that's fine, and you can use this same structure with our container structure. We preface everything with a Z, so it would just be Z container, Z row, and Z call. And we'll get into this tomorrow when we do the overview of the Smart Align framework. But I do want to explain to you that we use a micro syntax in Zen CSS called Zentax. And what that allows you to do is create the same container structure with much less code. Basically, we just hit Zcon, we hit tab, and we're already in here. So it's a lot less syntax. It doesn't have this, div at the bottom. It actually has a more semantic kind of style to it, so it explains more to the users. And so that is called Zentax. Now, if you go to our website and you come over here to the help desk and you go to Intro to Zentax, you can scroll down here and actually grab the same user snippet we were just using. So go ahead and click that, and you're going to grab this user snippet's shorthand JSON file. You're going to copy the code of that. We'll go back into VS Code, go to Settings, go to Configure User Snippets, hit on HTML, go ahead and paste that in, hit Save, and then you will be able to actually create the same container structure, like I said, by just typing zcon and hitting Tab, and then you're ready to go. And so it makes things lightning fast. It's a lot quicker, a lot easier to use. And we're actually developing a tool to transpile Zentax into semantic HTML if that's something you're interested in using. Now, when working with ZenCSS, you can use Zentax. You can continue to use this traditional container structure with divs, whatever's most appropriate for your project. Heck, you don't even have to use the container structure. But with that said, let's take a look at the example. A couple of things you need to understand when working with ZenCSS. To install it, very simple. You need to include the style sheets in the header, so the zen.min.css, the icons min.css. In the footer, you need to put your JavaScript file right above the closing body tag. And then finally, somewhere on the page where you want to use ZenCSS, you need to implement a class of Zen. Now, often we do that on the body tag. That could also be done on a div element or any other element throughout the page. As ZenCSS is encapsulated, it will only work when you've declared Zen. And so in that way, you can ensure it won't conflict with other libraries, other code or logic that you may have running on your system. Now moving down to the actual container that makes the A spot, you'll see we have a hello world. We basically just created the same container structure. We have an H2 inside and a P inside. Now you'll notice there's not a lot of code in here, right? There's not a lot of styling code. Basically this is a lead, this is a headline. It's all controlled, the style of this is controlled by this theme CTA class, and we'll cover themes in a later video. But there's several pieces of style at play here. There's the theme CTA, there's the card, and then there's the hero section. And what that hero section does is it puts spacing above and below each one of the sections. It gives you that nice open space and gives your content room to breathe. And so in this way, you're able to very quickly and effectively roll out different sections of the page, right? Like let's say we wanted to replace the B spot. So let's say we wanted to make a new container. We can go zcon, hit tab, and then let's go to the website and let's actually take one of the site sections. Let's grab the FAQs. Okay, so here's an FAQ section. We grab the code example. Remember, everything in site sections and components are usable demos with source code examples. So we just go into the source code, go ahead down to the bottom here, click this copy to clipboard button. Switching back to ZenCSS, we can paste that right in. Actually, it is a container already, so we'll need to replace the container. Just like that. We'll hit save, show in browser, and you'll notice that it's gone ahead and styled that up for us. It is put the tout in, it's put the headline in, it's put the different sections. This is all functional and modifiable. You can come over here if you don't like the background, and you can change the color. Right? You can take the background off and just use standard background, right? And it's going to style that automatically. Now that's another good thing to mention, just real quick. Again, we'll get into themes later. But you can literally style things using themes. And so if I were to choose theme dark, you'll see it'll go ahead and change everything. It'll change the whole styling of the component. So a lot of our components are stylable using our themes. So it's a very powerful tool to ensure both WCAG compliance, to ensure that your designs aesthetically are matching what you envision, and also to give other folks on your team an ability to work with your content without having to have you build out pages and stuff for them. Once they understand the container structure, they understand themes and a couple of other things that we'll cover in this series, they're able to quickly get stuff up and running without requirement from a designer or a developer, and I think that's very, very powerful. And so here we are at the quick start guide. You just get to this by going help desk, quick start guide. And again, I want to just reiterate, our component playground are usable demos of every one of our site sections and components. So you can go into these individual sections, right? Step 1, view sections and components. Step 2, copy the code. Step 3, paste and customize, right? And so if you go into components here, we have them broken out by page. There's a bunch of different pages. And again, each one you can come in. Let's say we like this card here. You just come to the example, copy, paste, and you're good to go. So that's a basic overview of the file structure, of working with the project, of some of the nuances of how to build and structure a page. I hope this has been useful for you. We'll see you in the next video where we'll be covering the Smart Align framework and how to use that to build some really cool, interesting layouts.